when I ran the numbers for the property I was living in, when I rented that space out, and the property I was purchasing, I was actually making more money every month.
Yeah.
So by buying that second property, I increased my cash flow.
Yeah.
And so to me, it made all the sense in the world outside of the fact that I had not much money to my name.
Hi, my name's Jess'd In, and I'm here with my co-host, Elise Santani. And today's episode of this Jess'd In is a very special guest, Mike Brockway with Zen House Homes. I'm so excited to talk to Mike because I love meeting people that believe in the power of leverage. I talk to so many people that have this feeling that debt is bad and they don't want to pay interest, and they focus on saving money on interest, but they miss the power of leverage. So I'm really excited to talk about how you built your business. We were talking before we started about how Mike really didn't come from a bunch of money, right? You didn't have like a lucrative background where you came into family money. So you're self-started. Tell us how you use leverage in your business and tell us a little bit about your business, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so right now I do primarily short-term rentals. That's about 90% of my portfolio, I would say.
Okay.
I also do some short-term rental property management as well. Just kind of fell into that over time. But as far as starting off, just like a lot of people, I bought my first property and I just wanted home ownership. I wanted to invest. I wanted to stop paying someone else's mortgage, right? And I met with a lender, a real estate agent, went through that normal path of progression, and I bought a property actually in Westminster in this area, put 20% down because that's just what I thought I had to do, right?
That's what everybody thinks. Yeah. Did someone way older than you tell you to put 20% down?
Work with the right lender, because I would have told you, don't do that.
So yeah, I kind of learned as I progressed and bought when I went to get my second property, I actually spoke to a friend I met with at a networking event, and he basically was saying, hey, like when you're ready to buy again, like let me know. I can help you with the loan and the financing. We got some different products that we offer. They were on the brokerage side versus being with like just an individual bank. And I said, hey, sir, I can't buy another house for at least a couple of years. I just bought one and I don't have enough money to put down. And he's like, well, you don't have to put 20% down. You can put as low as 3%. And that's when I was like, wow, I kind of messed up. I wish I would have knew that in the first place, right?
Yeah.
So you leveraged the first house to buy the second one?
I didn't leverage the first house to buy the second one, but I put 3% down, which at the time, it was only about like $10,000. I found a house in Globeville, actually.
Oh, where's Globeville?
Yeah, it was supposedly an up and coming area, but still
is it in Denver?
Getting there. It's in Denver. It's just north of Reno, like where I-25 and I-70 intersect.
All right.
So a pretty rough area, but I got a house, I think it was in 2016, 2017. I bought it for $287,000.
Oh, what's it valued at today?
I think it's about $500,000 today.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that was a good decision.
Yeah, for sure. But I was actually quitting my job at the time too. I was in financial services, worked at Fidelity Investments, and they're going to give me crap for this, but I closed on that house essentially the same day I was quitting my job.
Oh, smart.
Yeah.
You're the second person that has told us that this week on this podcast.
Yeah. But yeah, I was able to buy that house pretty much faster than I thought because the lender I was working with at the time said I could put 3% down, right?
Right.
So, and then from there, I started leveraging equity in various properties to,
Build
rehab or buy the next one faster. Yeah.
So how many homes do you own today?
I have 8 properties now. That's spread across, it's 13 units across 8 properties.
Okay, 13 units.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All short-term?
About 90% short-term. Yeah, there's a few long-term rentals still in that mix just because I can't rent those properties out as short-term rentals just because of legislation and licensing.
I want to talk about that. So talk to me about legislation, because I know that's a hot topic in real estate as it comes to short-term rentals. So what are your thoughts on it? What do you see evolving in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely becoming more strict, and I think it's almost a good thing because for investors that are really in the weeds and they're learning the legislation, they're working with a realtor that knows the legislation that's actually going to help guide them and make the right decisions or invest in the right areas. I think it's good because it kind of weeds out the competition in a way. People think that you can't do short-term rentals in Denver. And every time I say, hey, I'm from Denver and I do short-term rentals, everyone is always responding, how do you short-term rent in Denver? It's not allowed, right? But I'm investing in areas like Wheat Ridge, Arvada, Adams County, areas that are a little more conducive for short-term rentals where you can actually get a license. And
So the actual city of Denver will not let you do short-term rentals, but the surrounding cities will?
Don't you have to rent your primary home only, right?
yeah, there's just very
Yeah.
strict rules. And in the city of Denver, more or less, it has to be your primary residence
Okay.
for you to have a short-term rental license there.
Oh, okay.
There's also a loophole where it can be your primary residence, but if it has an ADU, you can rent the ADU out as a short-term rental, but it's super limited.
Yeah, I imagine that most people don't really want to rent out their actual I wouldn't
Right.
rent out my primary home
Yeah. And
to strangers.
sometimes people will say, hey, I live in the basement and I'm renting out the upstairs, or they rent out the upstairs. They live in the upstairs and they rent out the basement, as an example.
Okay. And you know what though? But because I love Airbnb, I think that when I'm with my husband, usually we'll stay in a hotel. When we're with our kids, 100% of the time, I prefer an Airbnb. It's just more conducive to having our kids with us. I have no desire to stay in a home with the owner there. Like, I think that's weird. I wouldn't want to do that as a consumer of Airbnb. So it's kind of interesting to me that, you know, like with Denver, one, that it has to be the person's primary home, and two, that there's potential that the owner's hanging out in the basement, you know? It just seems...
I would fear buying a house in Arvada as an example, and then I own it, I'm renting it, and then all of a sudden the legislation changes. How do you protect yourself against that?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. I think for me, where I'm at in my journey right now, I look at it, I'm from again, did finance and wealth management, and as far as my background, I basically look at my asset allocation. Half of it should be stable, half of it can be risky, at least for me. So I do own some single family houses that only underwrite or will perform or make money if they're a short-term rental. If legislation changes, I'll have to sell that property or figure out how to maybe rent it out as a corporate housing deal or something like that, or maybe to an insurance company that's working with displaced families. But it's very hard to do that on a long-term basis unless that's just your niche and you're doing that every day. But for the first-time home buyer or the person that is looking to do maybe it's their first investment or second investment, I like to look at those, I guess, potential deals with a plan B and C in mind. Hopefully, you know, there's going to be a backup option, right? So if you look at a property in Arvada as an example, sure, it will underwrite as a short-term rental and it will make money. But if the rules change, you want to have a plan B in place. So you don't have to sell it without a whole lot of notice and potentially lose money or break even. I guess that'd be a good scenario if you're able to break even. But your plan B could be to rent it out as a long-term rental if the numbers work, or you could rent it out as a room-by-room rental or a medium-term rental, right? So I would underwrite the short-term rental option and also underwrite the medium-term or long-term rental options, just in case legislation does change and you have to pivot.
That makes sense.
What justifies a medium-term rental versus short-term, long-term?
Yeah, medium would be, I think it's technically 30 days plus.
Oh.
And then under a year. Short-term, under 30 days.
Okay.
And some cities will tweak those parameters to say, here's our rules. You have to follow them if you want to be called a medium-term rental and not a short-term rental, to avoid that, I guess, no in some areas.
Do you have, like, what's your most successful property?
The most successful property is probably the one I did most recently. It's my biggest and scariest deal I've done so far.
Okay.
This one's called Splash House. It's a big 4,000 square foot house in Wheat Ridge, Colorado.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I've kind of like graduated up to this level, I would say. I wouldn't recommend doing this right off the bat, but I purchased it was a $1.1 million property. And then I put about $450,000 into rehab into it. And just
What'd you do to it?
Man, what didn't I do to it? It's interesting because another investor that I know, they were going to buy this property. I know they were going to do nothing to it.
Yeah.
And just put on Airbnb. But for me, I wanted to make it stand out. I wanted to make it unique. I wanted to really push the limits. I think that I get into a point where I'm like, all right, like what's next? How can I challenge myself, right? And I definitely put myself through the ringer with this one. But I did everything as far as changing the layout, updating 2 different kitchens in that house,
Wow.
added bedrooms, added bathrooms, really making it conducive for 20 people to stay there.
Large party.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
20
Yeah.
people.
I have a 16-person property, and I wanted to level up and go for a bigger house. And this one just kind of made sense to get 20 people in there. So there's 10 king beds in the property.
Nice.
And I probably put about $100,000 plus into the exterior, the backyard area as well.
Wow.
It does have a pool. We redid all the plumbing in the pool. We built retaining walls. We put turf. We have mini putt back there. There's a fire pit. Just all the amenities
That's
that
really cool.
people like to see in the nicer short-term rentals.
So you bought it for 1.1, put $400,000 or $500,000 into it. What are you netting? Like, why is this the best one?
Yeah, so I didn't start renting as a short-term rental until June 1st
Okay.
of this year. And so I don't have a full year of track record, but I should net, man, I think I should net like $10,000 a month
Wow.
on this property. My fixed costs are, I'd say, maybe $12,000 a month.
Wow.
And this will change because I have to move way the construction costs in. I'm going to do a refinance as well,
Yeah.
just to try to get some of that cash back. But some months that property in the summer will do, I think the best month this summer was about $32,000 of gross revenue.
Wow.
And the listing was brand new, right? So I wasn't able to optimize pricing and really get everything I wanted out of that property. But for this upcoming summer, I'm able to price it better. The listing's more optimized. I'm not just trying to get those nights booked last minute.
Yeah.
So I think as far as projections go, it should do $225,000 to $250,000 of revenue just on that one property.
That's
That's
cool.
amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. So what about, have you ever had, like, what's your horror story? Because I'm sure that you have one.
I have a couple of short-term rental horror stories, if that's what you're
Yeah.
referring to. One's a little more PG than the other one, but I can talk about both. I think the first horror story at the time was one of the properties I owned, my first short-term rental, which was a long-term rental. And it worked well as a long-term rental, but then once I converted it to a short-term rental, it absolutely crushed it. At that property, I didn't put very nice furnishings in it. It was my first one. I kind of bootstrapped it. That property got bed bugs one time.
Oh my
So
gosh.
That was my first experience with bed bugs, and I learned very quickly what to do. But at the time, it was
What
very
did you
scary.
do? Like burn everything?
Pretty much. There's 2 ways to get rid of bed bugs. The method that we went with was they basically heat the house to, like, this was maybe a couple years ago, but 150 degrees. And then it basically kills anything in that house, all the bugs, right? They send these big air ducts into the doors. Anything that's plastic, like the blinds, you need to take out of the property,
Oh my
or else they'll
gosh.
melt. And so they just heat the house to a ridiculous high temperature, and it kills the bed bugs.
Was that really expensive?
It was pretty expensive. We kind of rolled the dice. We just did the upstairs because I have it split up into 2 units, upstairs and downstairs.
Okay.
And it was per square foot. I think I spent a couple $1,000s on
Wow.
just heating that property to those levels to kill the bed bugs. And they basically warned me, like, hey, the bed bugs could escape to the downstairs through the walls, so they might come back. But at the time, like, I was kind of just getting started in Airbnb and short-term rentals, and I was cutting corners, but it worked out. Everything was fine.
I'm surprised that you didn't lose your love for this, because I would have been like, okay, I'm out. I don't want to ever do this again. Some person gave my house bed bugs.
Yeah, I think just being resilient and scrappy and just pushing through things.
Oh my
That's been
gosh.
key for me. Yeah, just through thick and thin. 'Cause you're gonna have bad days and bad months,
Yeah.
or bad years, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, just
But
somehow
overall, it's a
bounce
good
back.
deal for you.
Yeah, overall it's been great. I mean,
Good.
And I just started to see how well that property could do. It was doing, like, 3-4x what it would do as a long-term rental, right?
Yeah.
And it was cash flowing as a long-term rental. So as a short-term rental, it's absolutely crushing it. So I kept
Do you have anything
pushing
in the
forward.
mountains?
I don't own anything in the mountains. And that's just because for me, it's an operational headache. I want everything consolidated. I want the same handyman, the same cleaners, same staff, same team,
Right.
versus trying to build out a separate team in the mountains, or having my existing team in Denver drive up there,
Yeah.
and then you're comping them for drive time, and they don't love it. Their morale's down, all that fun stuff.
Well, I was asking because I know that this is kind of a short-term rentals are controversial, because in Denver, there's two ways to look at it. Like, this is your business, and everybody needs a business, right? Everyone needs to make money. But then there's also this housing shortage and affordability problem. And people say, oh, all these investors are buying up these properties and other people don't have the opportunity to buy them because you can likely, you get to a certain point and then you can come in with cash and you can beat out, let's say, the first time home buyer. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's another reason why I think legislation is actually a good thing. Wheat Ridge does it in a really interesting way, which I really like, actually, because they basically took the city of Wheat Ridge and they divided it up into 4 different areas, and they'll allow a certain amount of licenses per area. Their districts. So you have District 1, 2, 3, 4, and they're basically controlling the how many short-term rentals can be there and how concentrated it is, right? And that's District 1 was filled up so fast. So if you weren't on the list to get a license in District 1, you weren't getting one. Wow. But areas like District 3, there's still licenses available right now. You can still get one as a non-primary residence.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a great idea. I think other cities should do that. I think the city of Denver should do that as well.
Right.
But
because I know in the mountains, the problem is that there's a lot of people who are working, like the ski lift guys and all that. And they're like, we're not making a ton of money. And now we have nowhere to live because it's so expensive. And all of the short-term rental or all of the homes are, people are buying them and putting them on Airbnb.
I think the mountains are at risk for legislation to change for those reasons.
Yes.
Yeah. I think Denver feels safer to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not super familiar with the mountain towns, but from hearing from friends and other investors, they're definitely cracking down up there as well.
Yeah.
I know a guy that owns a house in Breckenridge, and they're actively working towards eliminating those licenses or at least keeping them at a capped rate. If you do anything, and from what he told me, if he messed up at all, if he changed his front door out without a permit or he did something wrong, like that gives them reason to revoke the license. And they're actively trying to revoke licenses and really cap things and keep that at a low. So I think they're taking steps in that direction.
Yeah.
And so hopefully that works in everyone's favor.
Going back to Wheat Ridge, what you were saying with the licenses, like if I wanted to buy a short-term rental in District 3, do I buy the house and then apply for the license, or can I apply for the license before I buy the house?
Yeah, good question. You have to close on the property and show ownership before you can apply for the license. And that can become a risky move. But I wouldn't say so much in Wheat Ridge as an example, because they do have a wait list for every single district, right? So if let's say you bought the property and by the time you closed and went to apply for the license, there were no more licenses left, you can still get what's called on a wait list. And typically you're going to get off that wait list pretty quick, especially if you're the first person that's up on deck, basically. I have friends or know people that have bought properties in District 1 as an example, knowing that they can't short-term rent that property for about a year because they're going to be on the wait list, but they want to own in that area, which is the area of Wheat Ridge that's closest to like Sloan's Lake and Atwater.
Okay.
And so, yeah, it's really depends on how fast you need to get that online as a short-term rental.
Got it.
But it's doable. There's other areas that it's more risky. Like a friend of mine, he owns a property in Blackhawk. I actually managed it for him, but it was very risky for him. He almost didn't get a license, and I was worried on his behalf, honestly, because up in those mountain towns, you could be in that wait list for a long time or just never get a license. And he still rolled the dice and bought a property there knowing he had to close, show ownership. I think the deed had to change, or he had needed documentation to change with the city, and then he could apply. But it worked out for him. But yeah, you may be rolling the dice depending on where you buy.
How's that Blackhawk property performing? Well,
yeah, it's doing well. And I think it's doing well because it has less seasonality. It does well in the winter because it's a winter destination. But in the summer, it also still does well. It's close enough to Denver. It's still in the mountains. Yeah. People still want to travel there. Versus if you're looking at Denver or the Denver metro area where most of my properties are located, summer crushes it. We do super well in the summer, but in the winter is our slow season. That property sees less seasonality because you get kind of best of both worlds up there.
Okay. What would you recommend if I was to invest in your first short-term rental? What would you recommend in terms of price point? Not 1.2 million, not the splash house.
Yeah, I think that if we're just talking like if there's no limitations as far as what you can get financed for and where your down payment is and all that fun stuff, I think around in the Denver metro market, Wheat Ridge, Arvada, Westminster, you can probably buy a decent property. I'd say $600,000-$700,000 that'll work, and then pour extra funds into interior design and furnishings.
Yeah.
Got it.
You can make a somewhat dated house look really good with a halfway decent design budget. You paint some walls dark, you put some nice furniture in there, you take good photos, you can still see success within a lower price point.
What are the must-haves? Like what are your number one tips to drive traffic to your short-term rental?
Yeah.
Bed bugs.
Not bed bugs.
No bed bugs.
Not 150 degrees inside the house.
I can tell you guys other crazy story after if you want as well.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that one. Yes.
Yeah.
G-rate.
You can use it, you can not use it, up to you.
No, I want to know about it.
But to answer your question, I think it was what you asked. What are the must-haves?
Yeah. Like I would imagine you want to maximize the beds probably, so that you can cram as many people in there as possible. You probably want to have a king size bed, at least one or two.
Yeah. I always maximize heads in beds, and I always put a king bed there if I can.
Yeah.
Even if there's only a foot of room on the side of the bed to get in bed, that room's getting a king.
Yeah.
I've gone to even greater lengths, and we've built custom king over king bunk beds.
Really?
So,
I've never seen that.
Like bunk beds with kings? I've never seen that either.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Ellen comes home and you're like, I got this bunk bed.
Yeah, and you can buy king over king bunk beds. They're like $5,000 though.
Really?
There's a company called the Bunk Beds for Adults. I don't know who they sell to. Maybe it's this short-term rental demographic, but I basically found a local fabricator and he can build them for half the cost. And
I'm gonna have to Google this. Bunk beds for adults.
Yeah. And they make triple decker bunk beds too.
Wow.
This sounds like they're catering to like a fetish demographic or something. Right? I'm like, are there furries in the bed? What's going on?
Yeah, who knows? Amish community, I don't know. And the reason I decided to build them custom is because sometimes we're putting bunk beds in basements and you only have so much ceiling height.
Oh, right.
And you don't want to buy a bunk bed where the top bunk is right up against the ceiling, right?
Yeah.
And I'm catering to, families, but I'm also catering to groups of friends. And as a guy who's traveled with friends before, I don't want to be in a bunk bed that's small and not a king and also has no headroom when you're getting up, right?
Yeah,
agreed.
And so we basically build them at the perfect height so both the bottom bunk and the top bunk has good head clearance.
Wow. Okay, so you mentioned when I'm traveling with all the guys, so I'm sure that you've had bachelor parties and bachelorette parties staying at your rentals.
Yeah.
Do the neighbors get pissed at you? Like when you pull up and they know it's you, are you getting dirty looks?
Yeah, I think it really depends.
Yeah.
Depends what month it is too.
Yeah.
In the winter, they love me. It's a little slower, right? But in the summer, some of these groups that come through, especially at the property I mentioned in Wheat Ridge, the Splash House, they definitely don't love it. They love that I took that property, I improved it.
Yeah.
And put a ton of money into it, and I'm increasing the value of their property, right? But some of these groups are just naturally loud, and I can have house rules. I have noise detection software in the properties as well. So if it goes above a certain decibel level for a period of time, I get a notification.
Wait, that's a thing?
That's cool.
I'm like, gosh, I need to keep that in mind next time I rent an Airbnb. I did not know that was a thing.
Yeah, it has to be a consistent decibel level. So I have it set if it goes above, I think it's like 60 or 80 decibels for over 10 minutes, I get a notification.
Okay.
And it's like an Amber Alert. Like if I could be sleeping in the middle of the night and that thing's going to go off.
Wow.
That's one thing I need to outsource eventually or get on someone else's phone. But I think that what it comes back to is I can manage these properties really well. I can stay on top of things. I can set expectations. I can have house rules. But sometimes when a group of 20 people get together and they're hanging out by the pool, music or no music, it's just naturally loud, right? And some neighbors are totally cool with that, and some neighbors don't like that. And so it takes time to build a relationship, to manage that relationship, to get them to see like, hey, like I'm doing all these things and taking these measures and these extra steps to be a good host.
Right.
I want to be a good neighbor as well. And just working with them. And if you do that, you know, they'll eventually understand like, hey, you're human, I'm human, you're doing everything you can. And this is a part of your livelihood. Like I depend on this revenue to pay the bills, right? Some people are going to understand. Maybe 1 out of 10 or 20 are not going to care regardless.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you can't make that person happy.
Right.
But you can do everything you can to at least try.
Yeah.
Okay, tell us the story about the non-G rated story.
This was yes, this is a pretty wild story. I did not have decibel monitors in this property, and there was really no, unless I was watching the security cameras like every single clip the next day for the prior night, I would have no idea. But I was I was just having dinner one night, and it was I think it was a Sunday night, and I get a notification from Airbnb saying, hey, we canceled your guest reservation. And it was the second night of their stay, and they were supposed to check out the following day. I'm like, all right, that's odd. Like, let me check the security cameras, see if they left. Like, what's going on? There's messages to guests, see what's up. And I go look at the cameras, the doorbell cameras, and I can see that they had a holiday party. And the more I dug into this, the more I saw on the cameras. Yeah. And so it started with a guy who showed up at the house with his girlfriend who was on a dog leash.
Oh, no way.
That was the first sign.
Whoa.
And then I go to the garage. I have a camera at the garage entrance too. I try to have cameras at every single entrance so I can see if there's extra guests, pets, things like that going on. And in this garage, like many of my other garages at properties, I basically turn it into interior space. In this garage, I have a gym and a sauna. And I could start seeing basically naked people running from the sauna in the garage into the hot tub on that camera. I'm like, all right, these guys partied pretty hard. Maybe got a little too wild. And so I'm like, all right, I'm just going to go over there. I live about 5 minutes away from this property. And so I stop by and I see a guy kind of walking in the property from like, he must have just went and got some food or ran some errands or whatever he was doing. I think he went to the dispensary down the street, super close by. And this is in Mountain View, Colorado. I love Mountain View. The mayor of Mountain View, she's awesome. The police in Mountain View are amazing. So he goes inside and knocks on the door. I'm like, hey, I'm Mike. I'm the owner. Airbnb canceled your guys' reservation. Like, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to ask you guys to leave because your reservation is no longer valid. You got to exit the property. I knew something happened, and I saw the videos from the party. And I just assumed a neighbor must have complained. And so I knock on the door. After I knock on the door and talk to him, he yells up to the 2 people that are left there. It's his girlfriend and his buddy. And he yells up to them. They're in the upstairs bedroom. They're not responding. He goes up there. His friend is hooking up with his girlfriend. They get into a fight, and they're up on the balcony with a railing at the top of the stairs, and his buddy's almost like pushing him out over the edge after they get into like a fist fight.
What are you doing? Are you just standing there like...
At this point, I'm like, lesson learned, I should not have came in here without calling the police.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I just made this scenario much worse than it should have been.
Yeah.
If the police showed up, they're going to take him seriously. They're not going to be having a fist fight in front of them, right?
Right.
So basically, I'm yelling up to them. I called a friend of mine and said, hey, can you call Mountain View Police and get them over here ASAP? Because I couldn't sit on hold with the police department. And eventually they settled down. They got downstairs. I'm like, hey, like, you guys need to pack up your stuff and go. The police are on their way. Police show up. And the guy is just a very weird scenario. It gets even weirder. The guy had one arm and some sort of condition. And when he got punched in the face, he was bleeding. And because of that, the paramedics had to come. So I have two or three police cars outside.
Oh my God.
A couple fire trucks show up, the EMTs, all these lights, this huge scene. And I'm just like, wow, the neighbors must hate me right now. Like everyone's like looking out their windows, trying to see what's going on. I just came in this property, asked these guests to leave, and this whole thing just blew up in my face.
Oh my God.
So eventually everything settled down. The guy was totally fine. He was not really harmed at all. They left on their own cadence. But yeah, it was just a big, crazy scenario that I would love to avoid in the future.
So it sounds like there was some sort of an S&M swingers party at
Yeah.
your house, and one guy got mad. I wonder if they're still dating. I wonder if the
Right.
boyfriend and girlfriend are still together,
The
or
one-armed boyfriend.
the one-armed boyfriend,
Yeah.
or if she decided to stay with his friend,
Right. Who knows?
You know?
Or both.
Yeah.
That could have been
Oh
so
my
much worse,
gosh.
though. Like the liability of going there. You just never know. If somebody could pull a gun on you, you know, that's terrifying.
Yeah. And I've over time gotten closer to the folks that work for the town of Mountain View, and they've been great to work with. And that's why I gave them a shout out earlier is essentially I should have just called the police and said, hey, here's what's going on. I'm not sure what the deal is, but can you help me escort these guests out?
Yeah.
We had another scenario where the guests didn't leave on time. The cleaners showed up, the new guests were coming, and I was out of town. And I just picked up the phone and I called the police department and said, hey, we have these tenants that won't leave. They showed up. They asked the guests to leave. They said, hey, your reservation's up. You got to go. And they let the cleaners in. And so it's just been awesome to, if you work with them, they're going to work with you. If you're a good host and you try hard and you really try to keep the neighbors happy, they're going to return the favor and help make your life easier as well.
Yeah, you got to keep those neighbors at that house with the one-armed man. They need to be on like your Christmas card list. You need to bake them cookies. You got to stay in really good touch with those neighbors.
All the neighbors.
All the neighbors.
All the
Yeah,
neighbors.
all the neighbors.
Bake them all cookies.
Yeah.
And all the police departments.
large cookie budget over here.
Yeah. But that is cool though. And, you know, as you're saying that, I thought, because I agree with you, it is a really good thing that the police are there and that they help you. But I would assume that people who are against short-term rentals would look at that and be like, and now he's sucking up our police resources, you know, and like, and let's say that you're in Denver where the police are probably not going to help you in a timely manner. Do people, if you're in a situation where you have to kick someone out of your Airbnb, they won't leave. Is there like typically a management company who can go there, or like, how would you deal with that?
Yeah, technically I'm the management company.
Okay.
But if you're in the city of Denver, definitely a different story, right? You can get Airbnb involved or the platform involved to an extent, but they're going to do the same thing you're doing. They're going to call the guest, message the guest, ask them to leave, right? And I haven't tested this theory with other areas. Luckily, I haven't had to test it out.
Yeah.
We've had pretty good luck otherwise. But yeah, you're kind of just relying on the response time of the police department, right? And they're going to prioritize that. If there's other things going on, they obviously have to handle those more serious scenarios. And maybe they'll stop by and help you kick out your short-term rental tenant when they have time. But a lot of it is just relying on communication via phone, via text, via the apps, and hoping that they are good guests and they leave. I try to avoid this from the front end and only rent to or allow guests to book that have good reviews, that have a track record on the platform, that are a certain age requirement, that have a photo on the app, and just screen those people out from the start.
Yeah. So, okay, this is kind of backtracking a little bit, but before you mentioned that you were on your second property, and that's when you quit your job you were in finance.
Yeah, I
So
worked in
you
finance.
quit your finance job. Was this your full-time gig when you only had two? Because to be clear, you're a pretty successful guy.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. So
I feel like anyone can do this. So I'm like,
well, that's what I'm trying to get at. Like you only had, because having two short-term rentals is, you know, it's not that many. It's something that, in my opinion,
Not
is
that many
attainable.
Sometimes pay the bills, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, but you quit your full-time job at two homes. Were you kind of freaking out about that? Were you like, okay, I just have full confidence that I can do this and I'm just going to take it and run with it? And
yeah, I was definitely nervous. And at the time when I was working that finance job at Fidelity Investments, I told a couple of guys I work with, I'm like, hey, I'm actually going to be quitting, but I'm going to close on a house prior to that. And everyone thought I was crazy. Like, why are you buying a house?
right.
You're not going to have a job. You don't have a new job lined up. Like, what are you doing? Are you insane? But the numbers said otherwise. When I ran the numbers for the property I was living in, when I rented that space out, and the property I was purchasing, I was actually making more money every month.
Yeah.
So by buying that second property, I increased my cash flow.
Yeah.
And so to me, it made all the sense in the world outside of the fact that I had not much money to my name as far as savings goes. And I just put 3% down on a property. So I was extremely leveraged on that house, right? Yeah. But the cash flow numbers made sense. And that became kind of my full-time gig as far as managing those two properties. The second property I moved into was a level up in a sense because it was a 2-unit property or a duplex. So I then I also got my own unit. I no longer had roommates at the time.
Yeah.
And
Is this the bed bug house?
no, yeah. Bedbug House was house 3. But for me, it just made sense. I was making more money every month. I had my own space. I had 2 properties versus 1, and life was going to be good.
Yeah.
And so it was a little scary. I used all the money I had to my name to close and to do some minor repairs in that property when I bought it. But to answer your question, this was not everything I had as far as cash flow goes. Okay. I had a small business, which I don't necessarily talk a lot about. Me and my buddy started a side hustle. We did event rentals.
Okay.
One of them had prior experience doing this. One of them wanted to be a DJ. And I'm the guy with the business background who has his MBA. And I'm like, I want to start a small business. So we all partnered up. And on the weekends, we rented out like party tents, tables, chairs, up to, it was like usually groups of like 10 people to 100. We capped at a party of 100, and we only had like 5 things in our inventory. And so that was my side hustle. And I had no intention on not getting another job, if I'm being honest. My game plan was, I'm buying this second house. I'm going to fix it up. I'm going to rent it out. Then I'll apply for new jobs and I'll get another 9-to-5 W-2 job. Well, the event rental business actually took off, and maybe we got lucky in that Top Chef actually reached out and gave me a contract to do their filming when they were in Denver.
Yeah.
Filming their episodes here.
That is amazing.
So kind of weird scenario.
Serendipitous. Yeah, that's cool. So that kind of encouraged you to not get your W-2 job.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we worked with one of the production guys just doing like a construction tent up in Thornton.
Yeah.
And he really liked me. He got me in touch with more people to do the actual like in front of the production stuff in front of the cameras.
Wow.
Then we went up to Aspen Food and Wine Festival. They put us up in a place up there, paid for our lodging. We got to be tasters on the show as well. So we were like, kind of in the
want to
background.
do that so bad. I remember when they were filming that in Denver, and I was like, man, I want to taste all that food.
Yeah. I had no business on being a taster. I did not use anything I said on air. But yeah, it was a cool experience. And that business, I grew that to a point that it served a purpose for me. It helped me. It was a means to an end. It helped me have a side hustle, helped me create cash flow while I was building my real estate portfolio. And
cool.
so after a few years of doing that, I let that go. And I just focus on real estate now.
That's really, really cool. I think that there's a lot of people who are in the position that they bought their house in 2015, let's say, and they have a ton of equity and they're just sitting on it and it's doing nothing but just sitting there. So it's really cool to hear your story of 3% down. You made the leap, then you made the other leap, and now this is your full-time gig. There's so many people that have that ability at their fingertips, but the fear, I think, gets in the way. Yeah. Because it, to your point, is risky of what if you don't get the Airbnb license? What if you are now just stuck with this other house?
Successful entrepreneurs take that risk. Yeah. And that's what differentiates, the masses from the people that actually make it, is you stomach the risk and you say, you bet on yourself and you work really hard. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a mindset shift. And it took me a little while to get there and to get comfortable with that. Right. I mean, your first investment can be a base hit, and then you hit a double, and then you hit a triple, and you're going for these home runs, right? More risk, more reward scenario. But yeah, I think anyone can do it. And it's definitely not easy. People, if I see someone at a meetup or a conference and they're just getting started and they maybe follow me on Instagram or know what I do, they're like, how did you do it? Like, it's so hard. Like, tell me the secret. And there really is no secret. It's
hard work.
It's hard work. Yeah. It's putting yourself in the right room. It's knowing the right people, educating yourself. And that's trial by error as well. And just not giving up.
Yeah. So what's next?
Good question. So I actually just started a community with a friend of mine who does boutique hotels. Okay. And now I'm in a position where I'm like, okay, I have these short-term rentals. What is next? I just did the Splash House, which was hopefully a home run for me. And it was a huge property, a ton of work, way more work than I thought I was signing up for, because I acted as a GC on that project and the homeowner. But how do I scale? I could buy more short-term rentals, but again, I don't want to have a bunch of single-family homes in my portfolio that only underwrite as short-term rentals. I want to be able to offset that with maybe more conservative or less risky things in my portfolio. And so because I don't want to buy these big single family houses anymore because I have enough, I'm going to move into the boutique hotel space.
Okay.
This way I'm buying properties that are, 5 to 100 units, and they have lodging licenses, and it's more predictable, and you can value them based on businesses and NOI and all that fun stuff. So stepping up to the big leagues. I'm part of my friend Blake Daly. Again, we started that community called Host Launch. He's got a higher level mastermind that's just for big time hotel investors.
Okay. Host Launch?
Yeah, it's called Host Launch. And one of my passions is helping people. And so I love helping people get started. I love helping people get from point A to point B more efficiently and faster, and hopefully avoiding the mistakes that I made. And this is a way to help people get started with short-term rentals, scaling their portfolio, and then also maybe buying their first hotel as well.
Wow. Where are you buying these hotels?
I just started looking in Colorado.
Okay.
He owns Blake, who I'm partnering with, he owns properties in Tennessee, Florida, and California.
Okay.
But I just like everything being here. I know this market. I love Denver. I love Colorado. I have a lot of conviction in the future growth and the lifestyle and all the great things that come with Colorado. And so I'm trying to make the numbers work here. Just haven't found the right deal yet.
Yeah. So do you buy an old hotel and basically rehab it?
Yeah, basically rehab, do some value add. I'm looking for something that has an expansion play as well. So maybe a couple acres of land or something extra where you can add on to it.
Okay.
And just increase the revenue where maybe the current owner or the old owner doesn't necessarily see the opportunity, or they just maybe are tired. They want to retire. There's a lot of baby boomers that own some of these businesses or properties. They just want to get handed off to the next person. Yeah.
Yeah. What content do you consume? Like, what do you like to educate yourself with?
Yeah. I've been working too hard recently to consume a lot of content, but I always try to listen to different podcasts. I've made a shift more so towards YouTube these days, but yeah, any podcast on motivation, real estate. Everyone probably knows Brandon Turner. His new podcast is great. Chris Williamson, I follow as well. Lewis Howes is an old school podcast guy I listen to. He kind of hit the space before other people. And I'm now listening to more podcasts that are outside of real estate. My goal is to start a podcast that's 25% real estate, 75% life and business, and I guess just like happiness and goals.
Yeah, fun.
And so I'm just trying to consume more content that's just not just like bigger pockets or real estate focused content.
Cool. What's your favorite non-real estate podcast?
I'd probably say Lewis Howes' School of Greatness.
Okay.
It's just one I've been listening to for a long time, and I think he's changed the game as far as what you can do in the podcast space. I mean, he was there before a lot of people as well, but just super nice guy, authentic, vulnerable. And I think it's cool to see guys like that do things and be vulnerable. I think that's important for guys out there as they're growing, whether it's in business or life or real estate, just to have that kind of outlet.
What are a couple things you do that you attribute your success to personally, in terms of how you live your life differently than other people do besides hard work?
I think it's just, doing the things people don't want to do. I mean, I feel like there's definitely days where I'm feeling soft and I don't get to the gym when I should and all that stuff, right? But having the hard conversations, not being afraid to ask for help, going to the conferences, learning the things you need to learn, and meeting the people you need to meet.
Yeah.
I kind of lived my life in seasons. When I was doing Splash House and that project, that was 6 months of me managing that project pretty much every day, whether it's being on the phone with the contractor or checking out the property. And when that was done, I went on vacation for a couple of months.
Where'd you go?
I went to Hawaii to see some family out there. I also went to a conference when I was in Hawaii. Brandon Turner's Maui Mastermind. And then I also went to 3 more conferences that month. And so I just caught up with people I don't see all year and just try to catch up on what's going on in the market, because I was just I feel like I was out of the game.
Yeah. I
wanted to reconnect with those people, keep those relationships strong, and just get reacquainted with some things I maybe missed out on when I just had laser focus and I was working on that project.
I like it that you equate it to seasons, because, it's like, I feel like sometimes we get kind of stuck in our own way of just only being on one track and trying to stay on that one track and put all of our focus on the one track. But it's not like that. Like, you need to break it up into manageable seasons. I like that.
How can
For sure.
people follow you or get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'd probably say the best way is Instagram. My personal Instagram handle is mbrockway120. And then Zen House Homes has an Instagram as well. And then also Splash House has its own Instagram page.
And how can we help you in your business? Is there something that we can do to help you in your business?
Just keep being awesome. Keep doing this. Spreading the good word, helping people out. Yeah, no,
Help you find a hotel.
yeah,
Maybe
if you-
if
if you
anyone
got-
of our listeners
Yeah, I got any
has
leads
an
on-
amazing property.
yeah, off market, boutique hotels, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also looking for short-term rentals as well that are maybe 4 units,
Okay.
3 to 4 units. It's really hard though. There's only so many areas where you can buy a property that's 3 or 4 units and actually get a license for all 3 or 4.
Okay.
So
Can you
very-
custom build something for short-term rental?
Yeah,
You're allowed to do that?
I think you can do development or even like the ADU play, assuming the numbers make sense,
Yeah, I
right?
was going to say, is it going to be cost effective?
Yeah, really depends. But I've thought about that with the boutique hotel play.
Yeah.
If we buy a property that has a lodging license, can we add like 3, 4 more cabins or A-frames
Right.
onto that lot and then rent those out, increase the NOI?
Can you, if you buy a 3 or 4 unit property, can you take on the licenses from the current owner? Can those transfer?
Yeah, it totally depends on like what city, town, who regulates that area. But typically the licenses are not transferable.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to own them in your personal name, like Wheat Ridge. They don't care if the property's owned in an LLC. It really matters who owns that LLC, and that's who owns the license. And that license can't be transferred with the LLC if you sell that property. So yeah, it's a more of a license getting held in that person, their individual's name for the most part.
Well, thanks, Mike, for being here today. It was so interesting to learn about the Splash House and these other boutique hotels that you're working on. Congratulations on your success. It's really inspiring to meet somebody who started, and just grew so much professionally, and very inspiring to me. And Elise, thanks for being here today. And
welcome.
thanks for tuning in to this Jess'd In.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.